The distress signal reached the Galactic Council chambers during the middle of a heated debate about trade routes and tariff regulations, which made it easy to ignore at first council member. Vexioler, from the Methanian Collective, was mid-sentence about grain imports when the emergency override kicked in, and every display in the chamber switched to show a desperate transmission from the Valerian colony on Kessis 4. The image was grainy and kept cutting in and out, but the terror in first speaker, Talon's voice was crystal clear. This is Kessis, for calling any council vessels in range. The Valerian's translator device rendered his clicking speech into flat galactic common. We are under blockade by Kreth Dominion forces. They demand tribute we cannot pay. Please, we have civilians here, children. We need immediate assistance. The transmission cut out completely after that council. Member Vexioler settled back into his cushioned seat with a heavy sigh, while other members began checking their datapads for information about Kessis for another frontier colony crisis. Someone muttered from the back rows, the Kreth Dominion again. Another voice added with obvious frustration. That's the third system this cycle. We should send a peacekeeping force with what budget? The Frontier Protection Act clearly states the act is still in committee. We could assemble a task force from volunteer vessels that would take weeks to organize. The debate spiraled into the usual pattern of bureaucratic, circular arguments that the Galactic Council was famous for throughout known space down in the communications hub 3 levels below the main chamber. A young Valerian intern named Sissith was monitoring the distress call with increasing anxiety. Her cousin lived on Key S's for regulation, stated that all emergency transmissions had to be logged and forwarded through proper channels, which meant the Council first, then registered peacekeeping forces, then allied governments, humans. Were barely on that list. They had joined the Galactic community only 93 standard cycles ago, and most species still considered them newcomers who didn't understand how things worked. But Suseth remembered something from her training. Briefing about human contact protocols there had been an incident 15 cycles back where a human research station in the Kepler belt had suffered a catastrophic solar flare. Their shields failed, their ships were damaged, and 17 humans were going to die from radiation exposure. The Valerian medical ship Gentle Wing had been passing through the system on a routine supply run. Captain Moran hadn't hesitated for even a moment. She diverted immediately and transported all 17 humans to safety, then stayed for 6 days helping repair their station. The humans had been very grateful. They sent thank you messages for months afterward, and even dispatched a diplomatic vessel just to deliver gifts and express their appreciation, which seemed excessive to most Valerians, but touching in its sinceriticis, its decision that would have gotten her fired if anyone found out. She copied the distress call and forwarded it directly to the Human Systems Alliance Emergency Coordination Network with a simple note: Kessis 4 helped humans once. Now they need help. Then she deleted the log of her action and went back to monitoring standard traffic 3. Days later, the message reached the Human Diplomatic Corps' headquarters in Geneva on Earth. Director Patricia Okonkwo reviewed the distress call personally and pulled up the historical files about the Kepler belt incident. There, it was in detail. 17 researchers saved by Valerian intervention. Multiple commendations recommended. Cultural exchange program established. And a note flagged in red that read, Debt of Honor, highest priority. Patricia picked up her secure cum and contacted Fleet Admiral Rodriguez directly. Admiral, we have a situation that requires immediate response. How immediate? The Valerians are in trouble. There was a pause on the other end, and Patricia could hear Rodriguez pulling up files. The Gentle Wing Valerians. He asked the same. I'll have a response fleet ready in 18 hours. The Council is already debating what to do good for them, Rodriguez said flatly. We're not waiting for a committee decision. Those aliens saved our people? Patricia smiled. She'd expected exactly that response, because she understood how humans thought about debts and loyalty. I'll notify the Council we're sending assistance. Tell them we'll have assets on site in 4 standard cycles after the call ended. Patricia composed a brief formal message to the Galactic Council. The Human Systems Alliance acknowledges the distress call from Kessis 4. We are dispatching assistance immediately. Estimated arrival in 4 standard cycles. We will coordinate with any Council peacekeeping forces present in the Council chambers. The message was received with mild relief. Well, that's something at least. Council member Thexioler said. The humans are sending a ship or two. They're still new to this, another member commented. But any help is better than none. We should still organize our own response, of course. But it's good the humans are being proactive. Shows they're learning proper galactic citizenship. No one on the council thought to ask exactly what assistance meant in human terms. They assumed a patrol squadron, or maybe a light carrier group. That's what most species would send for a pirate suppression operation in a frontier system. Humans were resource-conscious newcomers. Surely they wouldn't waste their limited fleet assets on an expensive deployment for a minor colony crisis at the Sol System Fleet Command Station orbiting Mars. Admiral Rodriguez was having a very different conversation with his senior staff. I want 3rd Fleet, 7th Fleet, and 15th Fleet ready for immediate deployment, he told the gathered officers. Plus carrier groups Delta through Foxtrot. And I want the mobile fortress stations indomitable. Resolute and steadfast brought online, sir. That's nearly 40% of our rapid response capability. His chief of staff pointed out carefully, I'm aware for a pirate suppression operation. Rodriguez leaned forward, and his voice was ice cold. Those pirates are threatening people who saved 17 of our citizens without hesitation. Without asking for payment? Without calculating the cost? The Valerians just helped because it was the right thing to do. He looked around the table at each officer. We're going to return that favor. And we're going to send a message to every pirate warlord and petty dictator in this galaxy. You do not threaten our friends. You do not blockade our allies. You do not touch the people who've shown us kindness. And if the Council objects to the size of our response, someone asked them the Council can file a formal complaint after we've saved those colonists, Rodriguez said. Now get those fleets moving. We have 4 cycles to cover a lot of space. The orders went out across human military networks with the highest priority codes from orbital dockyards around Earth, Mars, Luna, and Titan. Warships began powering up. Their drives crews scrambled to their stations. Supply chains activated. And within 6 hours, the largest human fleet deployment since the Ganymede conflict began moving toward the edge of Sol System and Cassis 4. First speaker Tellen watched the Kreth, pirate ships circling overhead like predators, and wondered if anyone had even received their distress call. The Kreth Warlord Shockrox had given them one standard week to gather tribute worth 3 times their colony's annual economic output, which was impossible when Tellen tried to explain this. Shockrox just laughed and said they'd start bombarding civilian centers until the Valerians found a way to Patha. Colony had no weapons. No shields strong enough to stop military-grade plasma cannons. And no hope of rescuer, so Tellen believed as he watched the countdown timer that Shkrax had helpfully displayed on every screen in the colony. 6 days. 14 hours, 22 minutes, until the bombardment began. The Kreth sensor operator was half asleep at his station when the proximity alarms started screaming. His name was Vec, and he'd been monitoring empty space for 3 days straight because Warlord Shockrox was paranoid about Council peacekeepers. Even though everyone knew the Council took forever to mobilize, the alarm was probably a glitch. Vec reached out to silence it, but then his display lit up with so many contact markers that for a moment he thought the system had malfunctioned. Then his backup sensors confirmed what his eyes were seeing, and his stomach dropped. Warlord Shockrox, he screamed into the cum. We have incoming contacts at grid 774. How many? Shockrox's voice came back, annoyed at being disturbed. Vec's hands were shaking as he tried to count the sensor returns. I can't get an accurate count. The system keeps updating. At least 200 vessels? No, wait, 300. They're still coming through the jump point. What? Shockrox's voice went from annoyed to sharp. What kind of vessels? Military signatures across the board, sir? I'm reading multiple carrier groups, battleship-class power signatures, and something else. Something really big. Vec's screen updated again, and he felt his mouth go dry, sir. 3 of the contacts are reading as Fortress-class stations. Each one is the size of a small moon. There was silence on the come for a long moment. What fleet markings? Shakrox finally asked, and Vec could hear the tension in his voice running identification now. Vec pulled up the classification subroutines and waited for the computer to match the energy signatures against known fleet databases. The result came back, and Vec had to read it 3 times because it didn't make sense, sir. They're reading as Human Systems Alliance vessels. That's impossible, Shakrox said flatly. Humans don't have that many ships. They're practically primitive, sir. I'm looking at 347 confirmed warships right now. They're in formation, and they're heading directly toward us on the bridge of Shakrox's flagship Blood Prophet. The warlord was staring at his own tactical display with growing disbelief that humans had been in space for less than a century. They had a handful of systems. They were barely a footnote in galactic politics, and yet here was a fleet that would make most Galactic Council members nervous. Get me visual confirmation. Shakrox ordered the main view screen switched to external cameras zoomed in on the approaching fleet. What? Shakrox saw made his confidence waver for the first time in years. The human ships were different from anything else in the galaxy. They looked industrial and brutal with hard angles and overlapping armor plates. They looked like they were designed by people who expected to get hit and wanted to hit back harder. The 3 mobile fortresses were especially terrifying. They bristled with weapons emplacements, and their shield signatures were so strong they distorted the space round them as Shakrox watched. A formation of smaller craft launched from one of the human carriers. There must have been 200 fighters in that single squadron, alone down on Cassisfor. First Speaker Tellin was going through colony supply manifests, trying to find something, anything, that might satisfy the Kreth demands when his assistant Mira burst into his office. First Speaker, something's happening in orbit. Tellin looked up from his datapad. What do you mean? The pirates are breaking formation, and there's something else on sensors. Something big? They rushed to the colony's observation center, where a small crowd had already gathered around the tactical. Displaceland's eyes went wide as he saw the human fleet markers spreading across the screen like a constellation. How many ships is that? Someone whispered, all of them. Another voice suggested in disbelief. The communications officer turned around with a stunned expression. First Speaker, we're receiving a broadcast on all frequencies. It's in Galactic Common, and about 30 other languages play it. Telenorder Day human female appeared on the screen. She wore a military uniform with more insignia than Tellin could count, and her expression was perfectly calm. This is Admiral Chen of the Human Systems Alliance 3rd Fleet, she said in accented but clear Galactic Common. Kreth Dominion vessels, you are in violation of Galactic Convention 7, Section 4, unlawful blockade and extortion of civilian populations. You have 1 standard hour to withdraw all vessels beyond the system's heliopause. This is your only warning. The transmission in Dedalon realized he'd stopped breathing sometime during the message. They came, Mira said softly. They actually came. They sent everyone, another colonist added with awe in their voice on the Blood Prophet. Shakrox was having a heated argument with his senior captains on a secure channel. It's a bluff, he insisted. They're trying to scare us off without firing a shot, Warlord. That's 300 warships, his second-in-command pointed out. We have 60 ships. We're outnumbered 6-1. Numbers don't matter if they don't have the spine to use them, Shakrox said. The Council forces always back down. They negotiate, they posture, but they never actually fight. Why would humans be any different? Because they're not Council forces, his tactical officer said. Quietly, Shakrox glared at him. You think I'm afraid of some upstart species that learned to build starships a century ago? I think we should consider withdrawal as an option. We're not running from primitives. Shakrox slammed his hand on his command chair. Keep the blockade in place. Let's see if these humans are serious. Admiral Chen sat in her command chair aboard the us midway and watched the countdown timer that her tactical officer had put on the main display. He'd given the Kreth 1 hour too. The 58 minutes had passed. The pirate fleet was still holding position around Kessis for Admiral. We're at 2 minutes to deadline, her EXO reported weapon status. Chen asked, all batteries ready. Fighter wings are on standby. Carrier groups Echo and Foxtrot are in attack position. The Indomitable. Mobile Fortress Indomitable reports ready for combat operations. They've positioned themselves between our fleet and the colony, as ordered. Chen nodded. The mobile fortresses were humanity's answer to planetary defense platforms. But instead of being stuck in orbit around one world, they could jump from system to system each. One carried enough firepower to flatten a continent, and enough armor to survive a sustained assault from a hole. Fleet positioned Indomitable as a shield, because no matter what happened in this fight, those Valerian colonists below were not going to be harmed 1 minute. The tactical officer announced. Chen opened a direct channel to all ships in the fleet, all vessels. "This is Chen. We're about to engage hostile forces. I want everyone to remember why we're here," she said calmly. 15 cycles ago, the Valerians saved 17 of our people without hesitation. They didn't ask for payment, they didn't calculate the cost. They just helped because it was right. She paused for emphasis. Today we return that favor. And we send a message to this entire galaxy. Humanity protects its friends. All of them. Always. Weapons free on my mark. The countdown timer hit 0. The Kreth fleet was still in position. All ships. Chen said quietly. Execute attack pattern Delta 7. Show them what overwhelming force looks like. The human fleet surged forward like a tidal wave from a dozen carrier groups. Fighters poured into space, their drives flaring bright blue as they accelerated to combat speed. Main battle line advanced with the massive dreadnoughts in the center, their armor plates reflecting the light from Kessis sun behind them. The mobile fortress, Indomitable, lit up like a small star as its defensive grid came online, creating a shield wall between the battle zone and the planet below, the Blood Prophet. Vec watched his sensors light up with targeting locks from at least 50 human ships simultaneously. Warlord. He shouted, "We're being painted by multiple fire control systems." Shockrock stared at the tactical display, and for the first time in his career as a warlord, he felt genuine fear. The humans weren't posturing. They weren't negotiating. They were coming straight at his fleet with everything they had. All ships, evasive maneuvers. He ordered, "Scatter and engage." But even as the words left his mouth, he knew it was too late. The human fleet had already decided his fate. The first salvo from the human fleet lit up the darkness of space like a fireworks display. Except each firework was a hypervelocity round capable of punching through 10 meters of ablative. Armorvik watched on his sensors as the Kreth destroyer. Savage Wind tried to dodge incoming fire and failed spectacularly. 3 human frigates had targeted it simultaneously, and their timing was so precise that all 3 rounds hit within microseconds of each other. The first broke through the shields, the second penetrated the hull, and the third turned the ship's reactor into a small sun. Savage Wind is gone, Vec reported, his voice cracking. Direct hit. No survivors. Shockrax was shouting orders, but his fleet was already breaking apart under the human assault. Problem was that Kreth tactics relied on speed and unpredictability. They were raiders who hit fast and scattered when faced with serious opposition, but the humans had somehow predicted every standard evasion pattern when the Blood Prophet juked left to avoid a missile salvo. There was already a human destroyer waiting there with charged weapons when Captain Hrax's Night Terror tried to break for the edge of the system. A squadron of human fighters cut him off and strafed his engines until he had to limp back toward the main group. They're everywhere. Hrax screamed over the cum. How are they everywhere? On the midway, Chen watched the tactical display with satisfaction. Our simulations were accurate. She commented to her ex. Oh yes, ma'am. The Kreth used 7 basic evasion patterns. We programmed responses for all of them. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Humanity's approach to warfare had always been about preparation and overwhelming response when humans went to war. They didn't just study their enemy. They studied every possible enemy and prepared for all of them. The Kreth were learning this lesson the hard way. Wing of human fighters swept past the midway, their pilots executing maneuvers that would have been impossible for most species. Acceleration forces involved would turn a Kreth pilot into paste. But humans from Earth had evolved in heavier gravity, and their bodies could handle stress that would kill others. Lieutenant Rebecca Torres led her fighter squadron in a diving attack on a cluster of Kreth frigates. Her display showed she was pulling 8 Gs, but she barely noticed anymore, Falcon leader to Falcon wing. I have targeting solution on bogies 4 through 7. Executing attack run. Her squadron followed her down in perfect formation and unleashed a storm of plasma fire that overwhelmed the frigates. Point defense systems 2 of the Kreth ships exploded immediately. A third lost power and began drifting. The fourth managed to limp away with half its hull missing scratch for bogies, Torres reported cheerfully. Requesting permission to engage targets of opportunity, permission granted. Falcon leader, the carrier controller responded, stay sharp. We have multiple enemy contacts trying to break containment. Torres grinned inside her helmet. This was what she'd trained for down on Kessis for. The entire colony was gathered around view screens watching the battle in orbit. The humans had given them access to their tactical network, so they could see what was happening. First speaker Tellen watched in stunned silence as human ships systematically dismantled the Kreth fleet piece by piece. They're not even trying to negotiate, Mira said with wonder in her voice. Humans don't seem to negotiate with people who threaten their friends. Tellen replied quietly on screen. One of the massive human dreadnoughts fired its main batteries at a Kreth cruiser. The energy release was so intense that Kessis 4's orbital sensors briefly overloaded when they came back online. The Kreth cruiser was simply gone. Vaporized. Ancestors, protect us, someone whispered. Remind me never to make enemies of humans. The mobile fortress Indomitable hadn't fired a shot yet. It maintained its position between the planet and the battle, its defensive grid intercepting any stray fire that came close to the colony commander Marcus. Webb stood on the fortress's command deck and monitored the battle while keeping one eye on the planet below. Sir, we have 3 Kreth raiders trying to break through our grid, his tactical officer reported. Show them why that's a bad idea. Webb ordered calmly. The Indomitable S-point defense systems activated. Hundreds of automated turrets, tracking the incoming Kreth ships with mechanical precision. The raiders fired missiles and plasma bolts as they approached, but everything vanished into the fortress's defensive grid like rain falling into an ocean. Then the Indomitable returned fire. Its main batteries were designed to crack planetary fortifications. Using them on ships was like swatting flies with a sledgehammer. All 3 Kreth raiders were turned into expanding clouds of debris in under 5 seconds, grid secure. The tactical officer reported. Webb nodded. Maintain position. Those colonists down there are not going to lose so much as a window pane on my watch. Back in the main battle zone, Shockrox was realizing that his entire career as a feared warlord was about to end. His fleet of 60 ships had been reduced to 42 in less than an hour. The humans hadn't lost a single vessel. His tactical officer was shouting damage reports while Vec frantically tried to coordinate what was left of their formation. We need to retreat, his second-in-command urged. We can still get most of the fleet out if we jump now. Shakrax wanted to argue, but pride wouldn't stop plasma fire. All ships, emergency withdrawal, he ordered. Jump to fallback coordinates Delta 9. But the humans had anticipated that too, as the Kreth ships began charging their FTL drives. 3 human squadrons moved to intercept. They didn't try to destroy the fleeing ships. Instead, they fired specialized rounds that disrupted FTL field generation, the weapons were called. Pinning rounds in human tactical doctrine, and they were specifically designed to prevent enemy retreated. Kreth ships managed to jump out before the pinning rounds hit. The rest found themselves trapped in normal space with their drives disabled and a very angry human fleet bearing down on them. Drives are offline. Vex screamed, we can't jump. Shakrox slumped in his command. Chariot was over. Admiral Chen opened a channel to all remaining Kreth vessels. Kreth forces, your FTL capabilities have been disabled. You cannot escape. Her voice was cold and professional. You have 2 options. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. You have 5 minutes to decide on the blood profit. The bridge crew all turned to look at Shakraxi warlord, who had terrorized frontier colonies for a decade, sat silent, staring at his tactical display showing 34 disabled ships. Surrounded by 300 human warships, there really wasn't a decision to make hail the human fleet, he said quietly. Tell them we surrender for hours after the battle began. It was over 34. Kreth ships surrendered and were taken into custody by human marines who boarded them with a level of military precision that impressed even their captives. 8 Kreth ships had escaped, but their names and identification codes had been recorded and transmitted to the Galactic Council with arrest warrants. Satin Kreth ships had been destroyed. When they refused to surrender and tried to fight, not a single human ship had been lost. Though 2 destroyers reported moderate damage and 3 fighters had to be recovered by their carriers. With engine problems, the most remarkable statistic was civilian casualties on Kessis for 0. The Indomitable S defensive grid had been so effective that not one shot fired during the entire battle had reached the planet's atmosphere on the midway. Chen was receiving status reports from her fleet commanders when her communications officer informed her that the Galactic Council was requesting a conference call put them through, Chen said. Settling back in her chair, a holographic display materialized showing council member Deathworlders and several other council representatives. They all looked various degrees of shocked. Admiral Chen, Deathworlders began carefully. We've been monitoring the situation at Kessis. For the situation has been resolved? Chen replied simply, yes. We noticed, Deathworlders said. Your response was quite extensive. The Valerians needed help. They needed protection from pirates. Not a full-scale military intervention with 300 ships? Chun's expression didn't change. The Valerians saved 17 human lives 15 cycles ago. They didn't calculate the minimum effort required. They just helped. We returned the favor by deploying nearly half your rapid response fleet. By ensuring our friends were safe, Chen corrected. Is there a problem, council member? Deathworlders seemed to struggle for words. No problem. We're grateful for your assistance. It's just unexpected. You're welcome, Chen said. Will there be anything else? After the call ended, Chen turned to her XO, who was trying not to smile. I think we surprised them. Ma'am, good, Chen replied. Surprises keep things interesting. She stood and looked out at the fleet through the bridge viewport. Pass the word to all ships. Maintain position for now. We're not leaving until we're sure this system is secure. The Galactic Council chamber was in chaos. Council member Deathworlders had called an emergency session to discuss what everyone was now calling the human incident, and nearly every member species had sent representatives. The holographic display at the center of the chamber showed a detailed analysis of the human fleet deployment at Kessis 4. The numbers were staggering: 347 warships. Council member Praxis from the Zealarian Confederacy said in disbelief. For a simple pirate suppression operation, it wasn't simple to them. Ambassador Williams from the Human Systems Alliance said calmly. He'd been invited to explain his government's actions. The Valerians saved our people. We don't forget things like that, but this level of response is completely disproportionate. Another council member protested. Williams turned to look at the speaker. Disproportionate to what? To the threat level. Yes, absolutely. But we don't measure our response by the size of the enemy. We measure it by the importance of our friends. You've revealed military capabilities that will alarm every major power in the galaxy. Deathworlders pointed out our military capabilities were never secret. Williams replied, you just didn't ask. And frankly, you didn't seem interested in Earth's defensive posture until now. That was true, and several council members shifted uncomfortably. Human systems had been surveyed when they first achieved FTL travel, but everyone had assumed that a species so new to space travel couldn't possibly have significant military strength. No one had bothered to check again. The question now, Praxis said, is what you intend to do with this fleet? Williams smiled. Right now? They're helping rebuild Kessis 4. The Kreth blockade damaged infrastructure and disrupted supply lines. Our engineers are fixing it on Kessis 4. That was exactly what was happening. First speaker Tellin stood at the edge of the colony's main landing field watching human transport. Ships unload equipment and supplies. Captain Maria Santos of the Human Engineering Corps approached him with a datapad. First speaker. We've completed the initial damage assessment, she said. The good news is, most of your infrastructure is intact. The bad news is your power generation system took hits during the blockade. How long to repair? Tell and ask Santos checked her datapad with our equipment. About 6 days. We can have you back to full capacity by the end of next week. We don't have the resources to pay for this level of assistance. Tellin said quietly. Santos looked surprised. Pay? First speaker, you saved our people 15 cycles ago. Did you send them a bill? Well, no. But then we're not sending you one either, Santos said firmly. That's not how humans do friendship behind her. A team of human engineers was already assembling a temporary power generator that was twice as efficient as the colony's original system. Talon watched them work with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. Human behavior didn't match any of the standard models the galaxy used to predict species interaction. They weren't operating on resource exchange principles or strategic advantage calculations. They were operating on something else entirely, Captain Santos. He said, Can I ask you a question? Of course. Why did your government send so many ships? The Kreth fleet was only 60 vessels. A fraction of your fleet would have been sufficient. Santos was quiet for a moment. Then she sat down on a nearby crate and gestured for Tellin to join her. Let me tell you about human history, she said. My people come from a region on Earth called South America for hundreds of years. My ancestors lived in small villages surrounded by dangers, predators, diseases, hostile neighbors, natural disasters. Tellin listened carefully in that environment. You learned fast that your survival depended on your community, Santos continued, when someone's house burned down. Everyone helped rebuild when crops failed. Everyone shared food. When danger came, everyone fought together. But you're in space now, Tellin pointed out. The dangers are different. The dangers changed, but the principle didn't, Santos said. Humans learned millions of years ago that we survive through cooperation and loyalty. Those instincts are still with us. When the Valerians saved our people, you became part of our community. And humans protect their community with everything they have. Everything, Talon repeated softly. Everything, Santos confirmed. Admiral Chen didn't send 300 ships because she thought it would take that many to beat the Kreth. She sent 300 ships because she wanted to make absolutely certain you would be safe. Understanding dawned on Talon's face. You don't calculate minimum effort. You calculate maximum security now. You're getting it. Santos smiled. It's inefficient by galactic standards. But it's how we're wired, eh? Human medical team had set up a clinic in the colony's community center and was treating Valerians who had been injured during the blockade or were suffering from stress-related conditions, Doctor. James Chen, no relation to the Admiral, was examining a young Valerian who had developed respiratory problems from anxiety. Your oxygen levels are low, he explained through the translation device. I'm going to give you something to help with that, and I want you to practice these breathing exercises. The young Valerian, whose name was Tirith, nodded nervously. Will I be okay? He asked. You'll be fine, Dr. Chen assured him. The stress of the blockade affected a lot of people. Your body just needs time to recover after treating Tirith. Dr. Chen moved on to the next patient while thinking about what Captain Santos had told the crew during their briefing. The Valerians had helped humans without hesitation. Now it was humanity's turn to return that kindness. It felt right in a way that transcended political calculations or resource management. Back in the Galactic Council chamber, the debate was still going. What concerns us, Thexioler said carefully, is setting a precedent. If every species responds to minor incidents with massive military deployments, then maybe there will be fewer incidents. Williams interrupted. The Kreth Dominion had been terrorizing frontier colonies for years, as everyone knew the Council's response would be slow and minimal. Now they know humanity's response will be fast and overwhelming. You can't police the entire galaxy. We're not trying to, Williams said. We're just protecting our friends, if other species want that protection. They're welcome to become our friends to Praxis. Lean forward. And how exactly does one become humanity's friend, Ambassador? Williams smiled, the same way the Valerians did. Help us when we need it. Treat us with respect. Be genuine in your dealings. Humans are pretty simple in that regard, and in return you offer military protection. In return, we offer loyalty, Williams corrected. Military protection is just one aspect of that. We also offer trade, cultural exchange, technological cooperation, and the knowledge that if something goes wrong, humanity will show up to help. The council members looked at each other. The human ambassador was essentially offering an alternative to the existing galactic order. One based on relationship networks rather than formal treaties and power blocks. It was unconventional and unpredictable, which made it dangerous to establish powers, but for smaller species who had always been at the mercy of larger ones. It was deeply appealing after the session ended. Dexioler approached Williams privately. "You've complicated things significantly," the council member said. But his tone wasn't entirely disapproving. "That wasn't our intention," Williams replied honestly. "We just wanted to help the Valerians." "I believe you," Dexioler said. "That's what makes this so interesting. You didn't deploy that fleet for strategic gain or political leverage. You did it because you genuinely care about repaying a debt of kindness. Is that so hard to understand? For most species in the galaxy?" "Yes," Dexioler said. "We've spent thousands of years learning to think in terms of calculated advantage. Humans think in terms of relationships. It's refreshing and terrifying in equal measure." Williams laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one," Dexioler said. "Just do me a favor, Ambassador." "What's that?" "Try not to surprise us like this too often. The Council's medical staff can only handle so much stress back on KSS-4. Admiral Chen made a personal visit to the planet's surface first. Speaker Tellin met her at the landing pad, along with most of the colony's leadership. "Admiral," Tellin said formally, "the colony of KSS-4 owes you a debt we can never fully repay." Chen smiled warmly. "First Speaker, you already paid that debt 15 cycles ago when you saved our people. What we're doing now is just reciprocating 17 people for an entire fleet." Tellin shook his head. "The mathematics isn't math," Chen finished. "I know, everyone keeps saying that. Let me tell you something about humans, First Speaker. We don't calculate the value of friendship by counting numbers. When someone shows us kindness, we remember it. When someone needs help, we provide it. That's not inefficient. It's human." She looked around at the colony. "Your people didn't hesitate to help ours. You didn't form a committee to debate it. You didn't calculate the cost-benefit ratio. You just did what was right." Talon nodded slowly. "We did then. You shouldn't be surprised that we did the same thing," Chen said. "Humans protect their friends. All of them, always." "That's not a slogan, First Speaker. That's a promise." As Chen walked through the colony with Tellin, she saw human and Valerian workers side by side repairing buildings and systems. 6 months after the Battle of KSS-4, the galaxy was still adjusting to what had happened in a quiet office on a space station orbiting the Thalexian homeworld. Senior Counselor Vareth reviewed intelligence reports with growing concern. The reports all told the same story. Small species across the frontier were reaching out to humanity. Trade agreements were being signed. Cultural exchange programs were being established. Research partnerships were forming. And none of it looked like traditional power politics. It looked like friendship. This one is particularly interesting. Pulling up a file, the Poroth Collective. They have mineral rights in the Kepler sector that everyone has been trying to acquire for decades. Who did they give them to? They offered them to humanity at cost, the aide said, not for sale, as a gift. The Poroth ambassador's exact words were, "We want to be good neighbors to people who value friendship." Vareth sat back in his chair there, building a network. "Yes, Counselor, and it's not based on military alliances or mutual defense pacts. It's based on reciprocal kindness." "That's absurd," Vareth said. "But he didn't sound convinced, is it?" The aide asked. "The Valerians saved 17 humans, and humanity deployed 300 ships to protect them. That's a 40,000% return on investment. By anyone's calculation, you can't quantify friendship like that." "The humans obviously do," the aide replied. "And smaller species are taking notice. They're realizing that a genuine act of kindness toward humanity might be the best insurance policy in the galaxy." Vareth pulled up a star map showing human space and the surrounding systems. There were dozens of new markers indicating trade routes, communication relays, diplomatic connections. All of them had been established in the last 6 months. "What are the major powers saying?" he asked publicly. "Nothing privately?" They're recalculating their entire strategic doctrine that made sense when humanity first joined the galactic community. Everyone had dismissed them as newcomers with limited influence. Now, everyone was realizing that humanity had been quietly building one of the largest fleets in known space and was willing to use it to defend their friends that changed everything on Earth. In the Human Diplomatic Corps headquarters, Director Patricia Okonkwo was reading similar reports with a mixture of amusement and concern. "We've received 47 diplomatic overtures in the last month alone," her assistant reported. "Everyone wants to establish formal relations. Everyone wants a human fleet to protect them." Patricia corrected, "Is that a problem?" "It could be if we're not careful," Patricia said. "We can't become the galaxy's military force for hire. That's not who we are. So what do we do?" Patricia thought about it. "We stay true to our principles. We help people who help us. We build genuine relationships, and we make it clear that friendship with humanity requires actual friendship. Not just strategic positioning. Some species won't understand that, then they're not our friends." Patricia said simply. In a frontier system 300 light-years from Kessis 4, a small mining colony called Brennick 7 was facing its own crisis claim. Jumpers from the notorious Vorten Syndicate had moved into the system and were threatening to take over the colony's operations by force. The colony administrator, a Heavian named Kellex, sat in his office trying to figure out what to do. The Galactic Council would take months to respond if they responded at all. The Vorten Syndicate was notorious for exploiting legal loopholes, and by the time any official peacekeepers arrived, the colony would already be under Vorten. Contra Chelix pulled up his communications console and stared at the human systems. Alliance diplomatic frequency. His colony had never had direct contact with humans before. But everyone had heard the story about Kessis, for he made a decision and opened a channel 3 days later. A human frigate dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Brennick 7 system. It was a single ship. Not a massive fleet, but when it broadcast its identification code, the Vorten claim jumpers suddenly became very interested in leaving. The frigate captain, Commander Sarah Park, sent a simple message to the Vorten ships. "This system is under Human Systems Alliance protection. You are advised to depart immediately." The Vorten commander tried to bluff. "By what authority?" "By the authority of friendship," Park replied. "The Brennick 7 colony requested our assistance. We're providing it. Now leave or we'll escort you out the hard way." The Vortens left. Commander Park met with Administrator Kellex via holoconference after the crisis ended. "Commander, I don't know how to thank you," Kellex said, "but I must admit, I'm confused. My colony has never had contact with humans before. We don't have any existing relationship. Why did you help us?" Park smiled. "You asked for help, that's enough. Humanity doesn't require a pre-existing relationship to offer assistance. It just requires that people genuinely need it. But what do you expect in return?" "Nothing immediate," Park said. "Maybe someday you'll help someone who needs it. Maybe that someone will be human. Maybe it won't. Either way, the galaxy becomes a slightly better place." Kellex struggled to understand the logic. "You're saying you helped us hoping we'll pay it forward to someone else?" "Basically, yes," Park confirmed. "That's how networks of trust get built. One act of kindness at a time." After the call ended, Kellex sat in silence for a long time. Then he put out a call to every business and administrative contact he had in the sector. "If you ever have the opportunity to help humans, take it. They're good people back at the Galactic Council." A closed-door session was taking place with only the most senior members present. "The situation is developing faster than we anticipated," Council member Deathworlders said. "Humanity is establishing influence across 24 frontier sectors. They're not establishing influence." Praxis corrected. "They're making friends. There's a difference. The result is the same," another council member argued. "They're creating a network of loyal allies. Loyal because those allies want to be loyal," Praxis pointed out. "Not because of treaties or threats. The humans aren't demanding anything in return for their assistance. That makes it even more effective," Vareth said. He'd been invited to this session as an expert on human behavior. Species that receive unconditional help are more likely to reciprocate genuinely. "So what do we do about it?" Deathworlders Askedvareth spread his hands. "What can we do? The humans aren't violating any council regulations. They're not engaging in aggressive expansion. They're just helping people who ask for help we could require council approval for military deployments. That would take a treaty amendment, and I guarantee humanity would veto it, Praxis said. Besides, do we really want to discourage species from helping each other? The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications finally. Dexioler spoke. Perhaps the question isn't what we do about humanity. Perhaps the question is what we can learn from them. You want the council to adopt human diplomatic principles? Someone asked skeptically. I want the council to consider why those principles are working so well, Dexioler said. For thousands of years, we've operated on calculated advantage and resource exchange. Maybe there's room for a different approach on Kessis 4. The colony had fully recovered from the blockade. First speaker, Talon, stood at the dedication ceremony for a new monument in the colony's central plaza. The monument was simple. A tall stone pillar with inscriptions in Valerian and English. It read, "In gratitude to the Human Systems Alliance, who came when called and asked for nothing in return. May we always remember that friendship is stronger than fear." Admiral Chen attended the ceremony via holopresence from Earth. Though she would have preferred to be there in person, first speaker, she said when it was her turn to speak. This monument honors my fleet, but the real honor belongs to your people. You started this by saving our researchers 15 cycles ago. Everything that followed came from that single act of kindness. Tella nodded. We helped because it was right, and we helped you for the same reason, Chen replied. That's the cycle we want to create. Kindness answered with kindness. Help offered in return. Trust built one interaction at a time. She looked at the gathered crowd of Valerians. My government has authorized me to announce something today, Chen continued. The mobile fortress Indomitable will remain in orbit around Kessis 4, permanently as part of our frontier protection initiative. You've saved our people once. We'll make sure no one threatens you again. The crowd erupted in surprised chatter. Talon looked stunned. Admiral, that's an incredible commitment of resources. It's an investment in friendship, Chen said firmly. And humans consider that the best investment we can make after the ceremony. Talon's aide Mira approached him privately. First speaker. I've been monitoring communications across the sector, she said quietly. Do you know how many species are reaching out to humans now? How many? Dozens. Everyone heard what happened here. They're all hoping humanity will be their friend. Talon looked up at the Indomitable hanging in the sky. Like a protective moon they will be, he said confidently. That's what humans do far across the galaxy, in a region humanity hadn't even explored yet. A young diplomat from the Sessic Commonwealth was preparing a proposal for her government. Proposal suggested sending a research team to study human culture and potentially offer assistance with humanity's ongoing terraforming projects in the outer colonies.